Yes, it is a Wednesday morning. This is your feel-good breakfast show, Expresso on SABC3. Now, as you might have already heard in the news, in a little over 2 months' time, convicted killer Oscar Pistorius will walk out of prison, not quite a free man, but no longer behind bars. And this is after the Correctional Supervision and Parole Board approved the placement of Pistorius under correctional supervision, making him due for release from prison on the 21st of August. Now, with us in studio to discuss the details of what supervision would entail, and of course the state's going to appeal against the verdict initially, is the chairperson of the Law Society's Criminal Law Committee, Mr. William Booth. Always a pleasure to have you here sharing your expertise, sir.
Morning.
Now, it's been widely reported in the news as well, you've seen it on the headlines, where the Steenkamp family is saying that incarceration for 10 months is nowhere near fair enough for taking a life. Now, in a case like this, how does the family's feelings and what they're putting out there, what kind of effect does that have on the granting of a correctional supervision?
I think one must go back to the fact that Oscar was convicted of culpable homicide.
Yeah.
And the sentence was 1 of 5 years in terms of a section in the Criminal Procedure Act which allows the Department of Correctional Services to release an offender after they've done 1/6, in other words, 10 months.
Yes.
So that is the sentence that was imposed by the judge. The state has successfully applied for leave to appeal in respect of the conviction, and obviously if that is overturned, the sentence can be re-looked at by the Supreme Court of Appeal.
Yeah.
The family have a role to play when the Department of Correctional Services looks at releasing somebody either on parole or under this particular type of release system. Then the family can make input to the parole board.
Yeah, and as you're saying now that the state is currently in that process of appealing. So how long will it take? I know that we will be hearing about it first in November, where the Supreme Court judges get to hear about it. But how long will that process actually take until some form of decision is actually reached?
Well, it's not a rehearing of the whole case. In other words, you don't hear all the evidence and the witnesses don't go to the witness stand again. So the period is going to be much shorter. It's usually a day. It might roll over to another day, and it's all done on the documents. So the whole record of what was said during the trial has to be transcribed. And then both the state and the defense are requested to file heads of argument beforehand.
Yes.
And then when the appeal is heard in front of either 3 or I believe it might be 5 judges at the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein, then both sides will then in court argue and obviously refer to the heads of argument that they've already supplied to the judges beforehand.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be this long process as happened during this trial and as happens with other trials.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are trying to gain a bit more of an understanding of what exactly this correctional supervision entails. Will there be restrictions? I mean, will Oscar be able to go and train, for instance? What exactly are the restrictions?
Well, I think the restrictions are quite onerous, that even if he's at home, he's placed under house arrest. He may have to do various types of community service. There might be programs that are implemented by the department. Whether or not he's going to be allowed to be able to go out and train is something I think that he would take up with the Department of Correctional Services. They might allow that to take place, but there's monitoring. So for the next possibly up to 4 years after he's released, he could be under a very, very tight regime at home, covering his movements and the control that is exercised by the Department of Correctional Services.
Well, Mr. William Booth, thank you very much as always. We appreciate your expertise and your insights on these kind of matters. Well, there you have it. I hope that you also gain some insight into it. In fact, we would like to kind of tickle your brain a little bit and find out from you what you think about this. Go onto our Facebook page, Expresso Morning Show SABC3. Do you think that Oscar Pistorius' incarceration for 10 months was enough and a fair sentence? And we'll be reading your comments a little bit later on. Stay tuned. Right now, let's get on with the news.